So we're live. So welcome back. We're back on the path talking about sales process and how to develop your sales process. So Luch, welcome back to the call.
Hey, thanks, David. How are you?
Yeah, going well, going well.
And hope you guys on the previous call took quite a bit in. We were talking before, if you recall, about the evolution of customer communication and how it is that we even get to putting in place a sales process or a customer management system, how we used to do customer management in the past.
Yeah, and I suppose really today was just going to tag on to the history and really understanding where it all came from, utilising the 3x5 cards even we talked about, and moving into spreadsheets and CRMs. But today we really want to talk about where do you start when you build a sales process?
Yeah, because I think when you view it from the perspective of you go in there and you say, "Oh, I've got to sell something. I've got to sell something." But it's a little bit more than that. It's a little bit more than that. I think the retail industry is suffering quite a bit because that's the approach that they tend to take. I've got to sell something, and you notice when you walk into a store at any point and you get an attendant who comes up and that's the first question they ask: "Can I help you with anything?" And you could easily say, "No, just browsing." And off they walk, and they don't help. And the whole purpose behind a sales funnel or a sales process is to be able to take somebody from that point where they're just browsing through to, hey, here's an offer for you. Here's something that is going to set you apart. Here's something that's going to really benefit you.
Yeah. So I suppose before we even go into building a sales funnel, let's talk a little bit about why would you want to build one in the first place. And there's probably a few points around this, and probably the main one would be, in the good old days, when people weren't inundated with marketing materials and they weren't sort of getting smashed to death by telephone calls and all those sorts of things, we could rely a lot on the initial contact to make a sale. So I think what's occurring, Luch, and I've noticed this more and more, is that people are now getting to a stage where they're wanting to take their time in making a sale, or making a purchase, I should say. They want to do their research. They want to get online and check things out. So getting people to make a decision straight off the bat is not as simple as it used to be.
No, and I think that relates a lot to something that you mentioned in the previous video that we did, David, about being blasted with 30,000 marketing messages per day. There's just not enough time.
Yeah, absolutely. So what that does in turn for the salesperson is it increases our cost per lead because we have to make more contact. And more contact means more costs in sales calls, in sales people. And I suppose the other side of that coin is lack of response. And I think people are starting to notice more and more that you need to send out several emails to get someone to respond, because it can go past their space at the speed of light if they've got another 50 emails coming through.
So yeah, I think this is where sales and having the natural ability to communicate dovetails or pairs up with processes, where with processes you then have the ability to optimize. And when we're talking about consuming time, where we are investing time in any sales opportunity, then optimizing that and reducing the amount of time that we have becomes all important. David, where would you start with setting up a sales funnel? If we view it as a process, where would you start?
It's a good question, Luch. And I suppose really what happens when we talk about process, as with any process, we've got to start with the end. And when we talk about starting with the end, we're saying what is the outcome that we're looking for. Now, it's an interesting distinction, because if we talk about outcome, some people think, well, the outcome is to make the sale, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's not. I hate to disappoint you. That's your outcome. It's not your prospect's outcome. So this is where people already get off track. Because if I start thinking in terms of, well, my outcome is, my objective is to make a sale, and I sort of look at it from that perspective, I'm actually looking at what I need as opposed to what the customer needs. So when we talk about beginning with the end in mind, my real question is, what are the benefits, or what is the customer going to get as a result of making that purchase? And it's sort of, that's the ultimate outcome I would consider in a sales process. So what we're going to do over the next couple of calls, Luch, I suppose today is about, before you build a sales process, you need to understand why you're building it. Now, the reason I sort of mentioned that question why is that, if we talk about that first step being, well, we've got to start with an end in mind, that's pretty obvious, okay? But we need a reason why, because there's quite a bit of effort in putting this sales process together, and some people will go into a sort of meltdown because it's so much sort of thought process and so much that we have to build. So just a couple of other reasons why, it's this lack of response, but also what's known as the long tail. There's a great book on the subject of the long tail, and really what we've learned is that, people may or may not make a buying decision in the first transaction. They might just sort of gather information. What we need to consider is how do we keep that relationship going in an affordable sort of method. And one of the things we can do, especially with technology now, is we can build relationships over a period of time just by keeping in touch with people through the different media. And really this whole idea of having a sales funnel is to fast track that. So if we talk about the end being that the client gets the benefit of using our product or service, and we work backwards from that, and we say, well, that might not be for another month or 3 months or 6 months. What are the things that need to happen prior to that occurring? And it's almost like reverse engineering the outcome.
Yeah, in the first instance, I think we were both talking just a short time before that by knowing your market and knowing how your client benefits from all of this becomes the really important thing. So if you've got a product to sell or if you've got a service to sell, you're not selling the service, but instead you're selling the benefit of that. You're turning around and offering your prospect the ability to benefit in some way. Now, if you can make the benefit that you have to offer pair up with the benefit that they actually receive or the benefit that they actually want, then you stand a much higher chance of a conversion or a much higher chance of selling. And this is the thing about the target market that we spoke about earlier on, David. Knowing who your target market is, or as we put it, knowing who your ideal client is. Because your ideal client is going to buy from you. And the question is, why are they going to buy it from you? What is it that they're going to get by having your products or services?
Yeah. Now, there's a couple other reasons before we get into the detail. And one of them is, people's attention span is shrinking. There's no question in my mind that the way social media is pushing people, they're scanning through a lot of things. They're looking for great headlines before they go into detail. We used to have like 4 television stations, and now we've got unlimited television stations. People are receiving blogs from all over the world, and really they're looking for information that's relevant or interesting to them based on headline. So I sort of bring up the term micro-content. And what I mean by that is sometimes you've got to consider how do you drip feed information to a client or to a prospective client over a period of time that you can build a relationship. And so this is one of the reasons we do want a sales funnel, is because if we can drip feed micro-content over a period of time, we can educate our prospect on the benefits of our product over a period of time through some sort of systemized approach. And if I was going to sum this up in an interesting statement, we know salespeople who are out there chasing a sale. What they'll do is they'll badger a prospect, and they'll keep ringing them saying, "Have you made a decision? Have you made a decision? Have you made a decision?" We want to move away from being that annoying pest and move towards being a welcome guest. So in simple terms, what that means is we need to provide some sort of way of communicating where we're adding value all the way through. We want to consider what that content is so that it is actually steering the relationship towards the sale. And if we do all that with the end in mind, which is the benefit the client's going to get, we can build this relationship fairly rapidly through micro-content.
Right, and in fact, I think the initial part of the conversation with all of this shouldn't even be talking about your product and what you have to sell. It's about aligning yourself to the problems that your prospective market is having. Whether it be not getting enough sales, whether it be not getting your message out, whether it be not able to even get a prospect to the table.
Yeah.
If that's the problems that you're having, that's the solution that you're attempting to build.
Yeah, and let's throw a few examples on the table. Like, say we're working with an IT organization, and we talk about their sales process. The first question is, what are we trying to achieve? What's the end result? The natural reaction is to sell computer equipment or to sign a contract. Now, that's true for you as the IT company, but if we talk about the prospective client, the outcome is for them to eliminate their headaches or to improve their efficiency. Okay? And so if we start thinking in terms of, well, they're trying to improve their efficiency or eliminate headaches, it becomes totally different content that we're creating. So instead of talking about how good we are or what we offer, what we start talking about is how to eliminate or how to reduce headaches or how to improve efficiencies. And so we're now talking to them in terms of something that they desire as opposed to what we desire. And by doing this, we're actually building some trust and rapport along the way, but also really importantly is credibility. Because if I can educate you on all the benefits of having a better IT system, then what happens is by the time it comes to making a decision, it's implied that we actually stand behind those principles as well.
Yeah. And that's the key thing to illustrate early on. Because if you can't demonstrate that you stand behind the principles that you talk about, then you'll lose your prospect and forget even putting in place a sales funnel or a sales process because they're gone after the first call.
Yeah. So I suppose if we sort of really summarize what we're talking about in today's session, it's sort of like, okay, so we understand there's a benefit in having a sales process or a sales funnel.
Because with the sales process or a sales funnel, you get the opportunity to optimize.
That's correct. Not only can we optimize, but we can also automate a lot of the pre-sale activity so that the prospective client is receiving a stream of information rather than a one-off piece of information. And I'm not sure if we sort of talked about this statistic before, Luch, but you know, sometimes it takes 7 or 8 sales closes to actually get people to agree to the product or service. Now, a good salesperson will close several times in a conversation, but what we can do is by using a sales funnel or a sales process, we can have closes built into our correspondence all the way through. And the other thing it does is it builds familiarity. So if I get 7 touch points from a prospective salesperson, and they could be things like email information, check-in call, LinkedIn profile, it could be any of these things, right? But the 7 touch points prior to the sale makes me feel like I know, like, and trust that individual. And
yeah, and the challenging thing for a lot of people is what should those touch points be?
Yeah, and this is now moving into the next stage, which is the psychology that we need to build into this process. I mean, there's a brilliant book by a fellow by the name of Robert Cialdini, and he talks about the psychology of influence. And what he's done in that book is he's explained that there's a certain trigger activities and trigger points that actually cause people to want to progress to the next step or to build trust or to move forward in the sales process. Now, we know there's scientific ways of improving rapport or building relationships quickly. What we don't do is we don't actually utilize them in a systemized manner. So by creating a sales funnel, we can actually build that into our process. And this is what we're really going to pick up on the next conversation, Luch, is we're going to start talking about sales process and what are the components within it. But for today, I think the main thing that I'd like people to take away from this is I want you to think in terms of the final outcome of the sales process, not just from your point of view of selling a product or service, but from what is the client getting as a result of buying your product or service.
Yeah, and combined with that, in preparation for the next series or the next video, think about or write down the top 3 things that make you absolutely unique in your market. And it's no good turning around and saying, oh, you know, we deliver outstanding service, or we deliver it at the cheapest price. Truly, what are the top 3 things that make you uniquely positioned? You know, we talk about the unique selling points and unique selling positioning. This is really, really important to differentiate yourself from your competitors.
Yep, absolutely. So if we can leave the listeners with those 2 things to do before they move on to the next stage, which is really where we're going to drill into the details of what are the steps in order and sequence that you need to put in place to make sure you're hitting those psychological triggers and to make sure that you're progressing the sale in an automated way.
And we'll come back in the next video and we'll start building.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Luch, thanks for today. It's been very pointed and you know, really getting people prepared so that we can get the next step underway.
Cool.
Look forward to catching up then.
And thanks for listening in.
All right.
Cheers, David.
Cheers.